So welcome everyone. They're starting to come through now. Can you see the participants at the bottom? So you can see like participants and then a little number just going up at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hello everyone, we're just going to give people a couple of minutes just to get into the seminar and then we will make a start. I've got my outdoor clothes on.
Great.
You know that's because I'm too tight to have the heating on. So great, I've just taken my hat off. Oh, Rachel said hello. Oh, looking
Hello.
great. Rachel, I think she's talking to you two though, rather than me. I'm going to give it one more minute and then we'll make that start. 14 people in now, so we're near our numbers, so hopefully that's most people sat down with a cup of tea, I hope, somewhere warm.
Yeah.
I've timed it wrong. I just drank my tea. I timed it very, very wrong, and the 7-year-old's not at the level of making tea yet, so that's not going to happen. Okay, I think, oh, Abigail said, hi everybody, I've got my hot water bottle to keep me warm. Abigail, you're a girl after my own heart. Don't put the heating on, we'll be fine. We'll survive. So welcome everybody to a conversation with Step Change Design. I'm absolutely delighted that we've got Mark and Debbie with us today who are going to talk you through some of the work that they've been doing. My name's Emma Smith. I work as project manager for Empowered Conversations, which is an Age UK Salford project. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the format for today. So I'm going to do a little introduction. At the bottom of your screen, if you've not been on the seminar before, there's a little Q&A function at the bottom. There's a little icon that says Q&A. At any time, if a question pops up into your head, write it down there, or you can obviously write it on a piece of paper, but just pop it in there. And then what we're going to do at the end of the presentation, we're going to have some time for questions and answers. And as you've seen already, there's a chat function. So if you want to say something else as a chat, then by all means just pop it into the chat. So we've already had 2 lovely comments. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Abigail. I was just saying to Debbie and Mark, we've been running these seminars for 10 months now. And I was saying that we used to do them every week until I got a bit too tired. So now we do a couple a month if we're lucky. And really, it's just a lovely space where we can bring together practitioners, researchers, people affected by dementia, just to explore a new area and have a conversation about something different to maybe get us thinking in a different way. Alongside that, so this is something new. We've never done that before. Empowered Conversations run communication courses for family carers and professionals in and around Greater Manchester. Obviously, they've all gone online, so we've got a new course starting tomorrow. We also have a programme called Empowered Carers, and Rachel, who you two both know, leads on that project, and they offer one-to-one support for family carers in Salford. So they're offering coaching and some counselling support for people just to sort of walk the journey with them around supporting somebody with dementia. As a result of COVID, we chucked a load more stuff online just to keep people engaged and give people something to look forward to. So these seminars were one of those things, and the other things are we have a weekly disco, we have a singing group, we've had something called Escape to the Farm, which I'm delighted is coming back next month. So we're going to be back up in Lancashire at the farm, having a look around and seeing what it looks like in February and March, and seeing how the lambs are doing. Probably not lambs anymore. The lambs that we saw will now be big sheep, but I guess we'll be seeing some new lambs coming through. So I think that's enough of me blabbing. So as I said, bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. At any point, write your question in there. We'll pick it up at the end, and I am going to hand over to Debbie and Mark now for the presentation. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this today, guys.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Emma. I'm just going to share the screen with our presentation on it, so give me a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, can you see the screen? Fantastic. It's a huge pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us along. So Debbie and I are going to take us all through 5 insights for encouraging greater engagement with the outdoor space. Okay. So it's going to be in 3 parts and then the Q&As. So we need to explain a little bit about what we do at Step Change Design. That's Debbie and I in our practice. We're a little bit more than garden designers, if you like, as far as our work with the care settings are concerned. We want to introduce to you really the central piece of what we work with, which is our care culture map and tool. And there's a picture of it there on the screen. And then we really want to kind of give you 5 easy to achieve insights and ways to engage more actively with the garden. So that's what we will hopefully take you through this afternoon.
So I thought we'd start off by just introducing ourselves a little bit more. So Mark and I are both garden designers, and we have an interest in therapeutic spaces and have designed not just domestic gardens, but also hospital gardens and care home gardens. But we also have a background in project management and training in other careers as well, which became quite important to us during our collaboration. And we had noticed that many care home gardens often became unused, even if designed to the latest guidance. So we thought we'd do a small self-funded research project to understand why, the results of which we thought lay in the design. We were shocked to find it was not necessarily the case, and we were very much different people as a result of what we've been told was one of the largest research projects of its type. And so actually we are different designers as a result of that. And it's worth just sharing with you the key findings of what we found. The overarching finding was that those care settings that actively engaged outside most were those that were practicing what we saw as relationship-centered care or person-centered care and beyond. So the more that the resident in the care settings, and these were mostly with dementia, was at the heart of everything that was done, the more the garden was engaged with, regardless of the condition of that garden. We also saw that a fearful attitude to health and safety would effectively cap the interaction outside, regardless of any other practices or policies going on. It hindered that engagement and held people back. And we also had to do a check and balance on ourselves, that sometimes you may not even need a garden designer to increase the engagement outside, but actually the heart of the solution always starts with it being about the people. So in a care setting, that being the organisation and the carers that are supporting the residents, and in a domestic setting, maybe the home carer, relative or outside bodies who may come in. It was not about needing to spend lots of money. And so that was really a big learn for us and unexpected. And we decided to share our findings in an unusual way. We're practical people, and so we decided to create a practical paper-based tool we call our care culture map. So the idea with this particular tool, you don't need to see this in detail, is that it actually represents every care home and where they were on our study. Mark, could you just click the next boxes in there for me, and the next one? So this is made up of a whole series of columns and statements of what we saw within our study that reflects the care culture that we saw. So what was happening, the attitudes, the practices, the beliefs, and the interactions with the outside. And we broke it into a number of headings around health and safety, the garden, the organisation, the residents themselves, and the teams and staffs that were there. And what we noticed was that there was a spectrum at play. So towards the bottom of this map is those homes that were very task orientated and very often very fearful around engaging outside, or even not even acknowledging that the outside was a resource to be used. And then gradually, as you moved up through this spectrum, you go up through person-centered, which is where CQC want care homes in England to be, through beyond that into what we witnessed as the most beautiful, loving relationships of relationship-centered care, very much like a family, and beyond. We don't believe there's a top to the map. It is a map, and so like any good map, everybody's on it somewhere. And the idea of the tool is to identify where you are, what is holding you back, to plan your route forward, and to be able to monitor your progress up towards person-centered and beyond, because it was those homes at person-centered and beyond that engaged more actively outside, more naturally. And this was underpinned in what we refer to as the care culture spectrum. And so what we also noted, as well as this engagement level, was the nature of the engagement. So towards the bottom, those task-orientated care settings, we tend to notice that they felt more institutional-like, and that the activities that might be happening, if they were at all in the outside space, tended to be group-based. And this often echoed inside as well as out. And the further up the spectrum you moved, the more you saw that the activities became more individual-orientated. It felt more home-like. It was more driven by the resident and often was more spontaneous or evolved more naturally over time to reflect the needs and wishes of that resident. And so engagement was more likely to take place and be more active throughout the year as a resident wished it. And so what Mark's now going to do is cover 5 insights that we picked deliberately to try and provide you with some thoughts with that understanding that the people are the bit that matter. You can take away at the end of today and either implement immediately or at least review where you are in relation to it. Are you doing this? Are you struggling with this? And start to unpick to do more. So they're all things that you can do without lots of money, a garden designer, but should be in your own gift. Over to Mark.
Thanks, Debs. So here are 5 insights. Now, there are hundreds that we could share, but what we're going to do here is we've kind of grouped them around a theme, which is, in a sense, if we go back to the original kind of title of this presentation, it's about understanding the psychological relationships we have with the outside space. So you'll see a theme start to emerge as we go through these. So I'm just going to go through them one at a time, and Debs, feel free to add any more thoughts or remembrances that you've had around some of these. So the first one, take a fresh look at what you already have. You will have gained a sense from the early part of this presentation that Debbie and I underwent a real transformation in our understanding of our role with care settings. And so we really start from the place of what have you already got that you may have stopped using, forgotten that you have, or also those kinds of attitudes that people can have with something that's familiar, which is that they stop looking and seeing all of the assets and benefits that are still there. And unfortunately, the garden hasn't got a voice to say, oh, don't speak to me like that, you know, what about that? So what we're saying here is try and take a fresh look as though you've not been in that space and it's all new. And the image that sums this point up is the middle one here, where this is a photograph from a garden where Debbie and I visited during our research project. And there were these French doors that looked out onto a large lawn space. It was flat, you know, it was very easy to negotiate. But when we asked about why aren't they going out into that space, well, the feedback we got was quite critical. They were saying, well, it's too big, that some of the residents become disorientated in it. We hadn't seen that garden before, so we had a fresh look. And we discovered these raised beds on the legs. We moved the plastic chairs and the table, and we created a much more friendlier scale, like a little mini room in the garden, just off from the French windows. So this is an example of reevaluating the different kinds of furniture that you've got and how to maybe rearrange that familiar space in a new way. So we moved those plastic chairs and tables from another part of the garden. Now that could be something that's at play here, which is that you just might need to reorganize the layout slightly, perhaps bring the garden closer to some of the entrances and the windows so that you can gain more from it. The other thing to do is what we did with those raised beds. They were so sort of modestly put to one side, and we were thinking they've got the most amazing flowers in them. Why are they all over there? Why can't they come into their own, being a bit closer to where all the action is? So the other things we want to say here is do a kind of an audit of all of your features, all of the items and tools that you've got that you may have forgotten about, or that might need just a very simple clean. What about the bench? Could the bench be sort of repaired or stained or just given another coat of paint? One thing Debbie came up with in one of our care homes where we discovered an important item in the garden had been stuffed behind a wall. It was the idea of why don't you create a proper activity store? So if something isn't in fashion or it's not relevant to a particular sort of residential group, perhaps clean them, tidy them, repair them, and put them away, because they may have a use in future. And that's a kind of a money saving or a cost saving kind of idea to think about. And the other thing there around those items is just to consider why did we stop using them? What was the thinking behind it? So sometimes they could be adapted in some way for another use. The other thing to mention here is this picture of, what do you think that is over there on the left? If you think as a weed, we had a bit of an insightful moment around that. It's the good old dandelion. So the other thing we would want to suggest around this particular insight is, don't write everything off. Things have value. That dandelion for us taught us a huge lesson, that actually the humble weed could be a transformational and magical experience for certain people. So it's about just not judging as much as we can. And we know that familiar surroundings, whether it's our homes, care settings, or wherever, sometimes we stop looking. And maybe that's what we could do as a very simple sort of tip. Do you want to add anything there, Deb?
I think this sort of picking up on the relevantness of things is keeping that under review. So for people with dementia, that may change over time, and things that they may lose interest, or their interests may change. New interests can still begin for people living with dementia. And so perhaps in a home setting, you might want to make sure you keep relevant items out. Don't tidy away quite so much, keep them close by. Or even sort of stage set, pop things out that you think might be relevant before inviting someone with dementia to join you to engage with something. So it's already ready to go. And the other thing is, don't forget as well, some activities don't need anything. Watching someone else enjoy doing an activity they do is also an activity. So in the home setting, if you're the carer, you may want to just think about, what do you like doing outside, and invite them to come and sit and watch you take part in what you like to do. You may find that initiates an engagement with you, or a spin-off opportunity for them.
Absolutely. So the next insight we'd like to share is going outside. So what's stopping you? What's really stopping you? So in the first sort of insight, we were looking at more of the sort of attitudinal things we might hold about the garden and having to reflect on those. This one really is about checking some of the more tangible physical aspects of the thresholds between the outside space and the inside space, and taking a fresh look at those too. So the three images that we're sharing here kind of pick up on what we want to say here. What about room layouts? Where do the chairs face, for example? Here's a picture of a care home where we were at, and the best room in this care setting, i.e. the best interaction or opportunities with the outside space, was this one, and yet it was used once a week on a Friday night as a cinema. So as sort of taking a fresh look that Debbie and I were doing, we were able to maybe nudge that along and saying, well, could you use it as something else? Perhaps maybe even something like a garden cafe, something which gave you that connection with the outside space in quite a powerful way. So have a think about the way rooms are laid out. You know, which way do the chairs face? Are they facing the TV? And you're forgetting that every window is a 52-inch television with non-stop action happening outside. Talking of windows, windowsills can end up becoming shelves with clutter and all sorts of things that need another home. Think about the way that you look out onto the garden space. Is there a connection in that way? Because lots of interesting conversations can take place there prior to going out. Think about things like net curtains and blinds as well. How are they used during the day and the evening? Are they actually providing another barrier here? Think about the signage on doors. I mean, some of the doors that Debbie and I were looking at felt very alarming. I mean, pun intended. How easy or how difficult are you making it really to be able to go outside through those entrances and exits that feel most natural? Is there an obstacle course going towards them as well? Does it feel inviting? In what state of repair are these doors and exits? Is it like, oh, we don't go through that door anymore because the handle sticks, or there's only somebody who knows the knack of opening it? What's your attitude towards these exits and entrances? And then what about your open door policies if you're in a care setting? Do they now match the reality of the difficulty or the ease with which you go out? So refresh yourself about the way you actually step outside and try and make it as simple and as straightforward and easy to achieve as possible. One idea we came up with a care setting last year was to encourage carers to pair up and adopt an exit and to look at it completely afresh. What does it look like inside, outside? Does it need repair of any kind? Does it need extra support in terms of maybe handles or handrails? Just to make that transition as easy as possible. So also think about things like binoculars and books and information on those windowsills that aid conversations around knowledge. Like what's that bird? What's that flower? Can we go out and see? So think about ways of expanding a meaningful interaction with what's happening out there as extra ideas. Any more thoughts on that one, Deb?
I think just in the home setting, it can be easy to sometimes think that the back door or the front door, you've used it for many years and actually it doesn't need any changing. But sometimes mobility issues, both for maybe the carer as well as the cared for, may have changed. And so it is important to take a fresh look. Are access points easy to get in and out of without it becoming cumbersome or difficult for either party? So yeah, very much that sort of fluidity of, as you say, seamlessly allowing the transition from in to out to happen. And sometimes this is probably the one that's very much about the physical as well as any emotional aspects.
And just a little point there about we are talking about front gardens as well as back gardens, because some people do like to watch the comings and goings. And depending on which way your house faces or households in the setting, it could be sunnier in another place. So does the bench absorb the sun there or protect you from the wind? So although sometimes people think, well, it's about having privacy, it may not be. So do think about all of your outside spaces, whichever way.
That's worth picking up, actually, Mark. You remind me, one of our care settings in the study, they said that the rooms that overlook the front space were always in most demand when people moved in, because there was always something going on, and it was an area of the country where it was quite common to sit on the front doorstep and chat to your neighbours. So the front space was as important as any view of privacy might be for others. And the same is true in your home setting. You know, which way do the chairs face in your lounge? Can one sit and look at the road so you can watch the comings and goings of people going to the shops and things, as well as the birds in the back garden? Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Next one. Okay, overcoming the default to the indoor setting. This is quite a big one, okay? Because if you think about it, most things we do in life happen indoors, whether it's sleeping, cooking, eating, drinking, working, caring, and most things are geared indoors to make those activities easier to achieve. But some of them can be done outdoors just as well, and sometimes even better. So what we want to say really is that if all of what you do takes place indoors, you're really only using half of the care environment that you have available to you, whether it's the home or a care setting. We're forgetting the healthful aspects of the outside space. So what we want to do here is to nudge the thinking, and it's a big one. We appreciate that. There is a tool on our website which is about an audit of just looking at what you do indoors and thinking about what you need to do to help make that happen outside. It could be something like lighting, outdoor electrical sockets. It could be heating. Like anything to think, well, let's have the yoga class outside today. And when Debbie and I were working on the research project, it was a lovely, do you remember this one, Debs? It was a lovely June afternoon, and we were in, we were kind of visiting this care home, and they said, oh, you're just in time. This afternoon we have a karaoke singer, and he's going to be up in the lounge. And we said, it's a lovely day. Couldn't we all do it outside on the patio? And there was that sense, but actually this was a can-do attitude home, and all we'd done was interrupt the default. And what happened in the afternoon was the most amazing encounter. Do you remember the end of the afternoon, Debs?
Yeah, who could forget?
Basically, this karaoke singer went down a storm. It was great. There was at least 20 people outside on the patio. And then it all stopped because a neighbor complained about the noise coming from the care home. So it was like, we're having more fun here than they were in the flats over the way.
The police actually turned up. It was the police who came round because they complained to the local police who had a station at the end of the road at 4 in the afternoon.
Absolutely. So, and I think the lovely thing about that experience was that we had, in a sense, introduced a new thought process around valuing the outside space, and it was absolutely great. In fact, the acoustics in the patio area were amazing, and I'm imagining they would have talked about that long afterwards, because in the outside space you have a different relationship to your senses. It is a sensory experience, and as Debbie and I say, you don't need to create a sensory garden. It already is. So the caring aspects and the helpful aspects are already at work. So you get enervated, you get stimulated, and even calmed. So we'd say try and reframe the outdoor space as somewhere where you are, if you like, co-caring with nature. And in a sense as well, I'd also recommend that we start to look at what the resistances might be, if there are any around not going outside, or what the associations are with the outside space. I mean, for some carers, it might be the place they go to for a quiet moment on their own, or for a cigarette, or to talk to a colleague. In a way, we would encourage you to reframe the outside space as part of the working environment, so that you've got that sense that it's equally valuable and valid to be out there working as it is in here working. So sometimes you have to kind of really tease out some of the resistances that might be at play here. Certainly, if you give them permission to go outside, but it's still not happening, just drill a little deeper and find out what the fears there might be. I mean, the fears could also be about sensing that it might be a dangerous space. Something problematic may have occurred there in a previous visit or a previous year. Look out for things like that and try and address them. And in fact, the other thing that can happen outside by remaining alert, if you like, is that you can glean a lot of incredibly valuable knowledge about a resident who is, if you like, stimulated to talk about their lives in a different way than they would maybe disclose things indoors. And the other thing that can happen outside is you get a kind of a turning of the tables. Some older people are much happier and more confident outside than they are indoors. And some younger people who might be carers are perhaps less confident outside. So it can be a very interesting experience in the outside space with someone you're caring for. And don't underestimate the valuable opportunities to obtain new information. Not just about what they know and what their lives were, but also what their current capacity might be. How well do they walk across that lawn? How well do they handle an item or a garden tool? So yeah, anything you want to add there, Debs?
I think it's just picking up on you mentioned around fears. It is one of those things, if your default is inside, and this can apply in the home setting as well, domestic home. Fear can be an interesting element that could be at play, and it is important to unpick it. And sometimes in conversations with home carers, particularly if they are older themselves, the fear may be with yourself as a carer. You feel less safe taking the person you're caring for outside. Be careful not to translate that fear across, because that can actually undermine their ability to use outside, when actually there may not be, it's a perceived fear as opposed to a real fear. And it may be that for yourself in the home setting about bringing others into play to help you. So deliberately planning visits outside into the garden when another family member is visiting, or an outside agent, a physio or other people come in to support, so that actually, you know, there's somebody else around to enable that to still happen, while the person with dementia can still continue to do that and enjoy it, even if you yourself may be fearful.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because fear is not something we like sharing, but it does manifest. It comes out either as reluctance or deflection, or sometimes a resistance. And if that's allowed to occur for a while, it becomes a new habit, which is to exclude ourselves from things which have kind of generated the fear, maybe. It's a really important point, Deb, that you made there, actually. Yeah, and it's not an easy conversation to have, because it's an emotional conversation. So yeah, absolutely. Right, are we ready for the number 4? Okay, this one we've called Becoming Weather Ready. And it's something that really relates back to the care culture map that Debbie was describing earlier. Becoming weather ready. This is about moving really from an anticipatory stance around the outside space, right? We've got doors ready, we've cleared all the clutter, blah, 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 all systems go. It's into a much more proactive relationship with what's out there. Because no matter when you go out and where you go out, you've got to deal with the weather. So in a sense, what are your attitudes towards weather? Because there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot manage it. You can simply adjust to it. And Debbie and I are very, very clear about this, that it's not an excuse not to go out. It's actually an invitation to experience something incredibly sensory, and with multiple other knock-on effects as well. So becoming weather ready is about understanding what the current weather conditions might be. So you've got a sense of what we call a real feel, because it's very easy for a rumor to go around the house saying, oh, it's far too cold to go out today. Or, oh, did you get that breeze? Or you look out of the window and you think, well, look, it's still raining. And actually that's not the case. It's just the drops on the windows themselves. So think about how you communicate what the actual weather is. If you've got people who are outside quite frequently, whether it's to do with maintenance or it's neighbors, point out what they're wearing, because the thing here is about, that's one of the biggest clues. You wear appropriate clothing. So what we think about here is, how are the normal exits and entrances from your home or your care setting sort of prepared for engaging with different kinds of weather? Do you have umbrellas and wellies and coats and hats already? Do you have them for particular residents? Or if you're caring for someone at home, if you know that they're likely to go out during that day, have you got the way of the procedure for preparing them in good time, so that in a way, when the wish to go outside occurs, it can happen fairly promptly? So this is about, in a sense, making sure that you follow through fairly promptly and straightforwardly and seamlessly on the desire to engage with the outside space. So you can see here, there's also a very inspiring picture of someone that we came across in the course of writing up our research findings. And here, this lady is dressed appropriately for the walk around this care setting garden, and wants to do it. So she's engaging in these conditions, which for some people would be a sense of, no, we can't possibly, it's far too dangerous. So this is quite an inspiring image, because we do encourage engaging with all sorts of weather, and very seasonally as well. So the other thing here is, how do we dress people in the morning? Do we dress them in anticipation of going out? Or are they dressed in a sense of, well, they've got the slippers on and then we will have to do that when they want to? We know some people who want to go out during the course of that day. Are we dressing them from the get-go to do that, so that it makes that process easier? The other important thing about becoming weather ready is that we discovered in our research that if you were becoming weather ready, you were actually on the threshold of clear person-centered care, because you were anticipating the meeting of the needs and wishes of those who wanted to go out, and you were following through and making that happen. So a big clue for us in terms of where the culture of a care setting might be is the way that we read the weather readiness of the setting. This can be probably easier to achieve in a domestic setting because coats and boots they're already there. We already know which ones are ours and which ones might be our partners or the person we're caring for. So many of our homes actually do appear like this. So it could probably be easier to achieve. The thing that we would add there is that over time, sometimes it can be harder for us to put boots on someone else or tie up shoelaces for someone else. Think about some of the extra equipment that might be needed, or maybe moving away from shoes that need tying. For example, how do you as a carer ensure that you can do this easily and safely as well? Because the tops and bottoms of our bodies are the ones we often need to protect, and they could be the furthest away or the furthest to reach. So we're kind of mindful of that. So it's not just about having wellies. Do you have a way of taking them off easily or putting them on? Yeah. Debs, do you want to add anything on that one?
Yeah, I think weather's an interesting one as well. That the activities you might want to do can often be both weather and often seasonal related. So, you know, hanging washing on a windy day, it's perfect. Obviously sunbathing on a sunny day, raking the leaves in the autumn breeze, actually refilling the bird feeders after a frosty day, and the hot drink when you come in from a cold and frosty visit to the garden. You know, there's nothing more invigorating, and you feel quite virtuous for having stepped out there on a cold day. As a dog owner, you have to go for a walk, and you may not want to go on the wet day, but actually you feel good when you come in after that wet walk. It's sometimes some of the nicest walks you have. And for those people who are living with dementia who had an outdoor life, they respond so well to being able to still engage with those seasonal and weather related changes. Again, they bring forward information that may never come to light from sitting inside, even looking at pictures of the same kind of conditions. Stepping into them can engage a whole collection of new thoughts and remembrances too.
Absolutely. In a way, sort of weather is a year-round, day-long activity provision. And some of the easiest conversations that can begin at the windowsill say, my goodness, have you seen the ducks? Even they're kind of like freaking out in the rain. So it's a conversation that can begin, and then you can start to point things out. And after a while, you know, we all love talking about the weather, don't we, really?
Actually, Mark, that's really a good point. Is, you know, us Brits are obsessed by talking about the weather. If you don't know what to say, starting a conversation about the weather from inside could very easily lead to engaging and going outside. And that's such a natural thing for us all to do, to begin a conversation with, gosh, look at that weather. Yeah. And who knows where it may lead.
Yeah, definitely. And in a way, I was reminded there of the sort of the function of a wash line. It's something that we have to keep an eye on, especially in this country. But it also reflects back that very invisible phenomenon of wind. But wash lines are something that we kind of know about because we don't want the washing to get wet, so we might keep an eye on the weather. So very subtly, there are things in the outside environment that can become the weather forecast. So if you've got bird tables near windows, how full are they? Are there splashes going on them? You know, how are the leaves looking? Are they being swept along in one direction? The other thing about weather readiness isn't just the preparation inside. It's like, how do you then extend a visit outside? Do you have things like comfortable cushions that can insulate you from the bench? Do you have things like throws and blankets? Have you got things that can just keep you warmer for a little longer so that you spend an extra 10 minutes outside? Or, you know, things like that. It's sort of weather readiness is sort of in the round of it, really. Okay, and the last one we'll share with you today, drawing people outside. Okay, we've got a range of little images here for you as well. Drawing people outside is actually the tagline of our business, because we were trying to be a little bit clever here by having a double meaning. around the word drawing. So it's not just about designing, but we mean drawing in the sense of attracting and pulling. Okay, so this sums up our role really at Step Change Design. We're all about how do you draw, how do you attract people outside? So it's much more than just a design, as we've been describing in these other insights. It's about your understanding of your attitudes towards the outside space. So there are ways and means of doing this successfully. And one of the ways we want to encourage this is to say, when you're inviting someone to go outside, are you indoors with them looking out saying, shall we go out there? Or are you outside hooking your finger saying, why don't you come and join me? So with the second option, what you're doing in a sense is you're proving that it's okay to go out. You're seeing what they're wearing to give you an idea of what the weather conditions might be, and you're responding to an invitation. So there's a destination for you to go out to join someone with. Now you can add extra layers in the invitation here. You could perhaps also say, I need a hand. Could you come and help me? So what you're able to kind of harness there are two very strong emotions. One of curiosity, what are they doing out there? But also the sense that we want to be helpful. We want to lend a hand. We want to be supportive. So that is worth exploring. Debbie and I found when we were doing the research, if we were in the garden, we were very soon joined by other people, either physically out there or in the windows overlooking it, because they wanted to know what we were doing. What are they up to out there? So think about being outside yourselves if you are wanting people to join you. Think about activities that might be seasonally appropriate as well, like in the autumn, raking leaves, cleaning out the bird feeders, doing the winter tidy ups, setting out chairs for the spring and summer. There are lots and lots of things you can be doing. The other thing is not to be doing anything as such, but just waving your mug and inviting you out to join you with a cup of tea or a coffee. So it's as much about not having to feel you have to do something horticultural, but to be in that space. So what we're kind of really saying here is think about where you are in relationship to the space and do what you can to be out there yourselves. The key thing we found is it's actually encouraging movement across a threshold that is the hardest thing. Once somebody is outside in that space, it's amazing how long you can stay out there as you've acclimatized and adjusted to the conditions. The other thing to remember is that if you are a carer, you are not going out into that space alone. There is another carer outside that's been doing this job for thousands of years. It's called Mother Nature. Mother Nature is there to ensure that all of you have a healthful and caring experience, and a very stimulating one as well. So do not feel alone in that space. You are very well supported. Anything you'd like to add there, Debs?
I think this one brings us right back to one of the things that began our whole study, really. We know that going outside is good for all of us. The science has existed for decades. And Mark and I deliberately wanted to do a study into, if we know it's good for us, why are we not going out more? That was what we wanted to investigate, the why. And so as a carer, whether you're in a care setting or in a home setting, remember to step outside for yourself, for your own health and well-being, to gain the benefit of it. Do what you enjoy doing outside, whether that be simply a breath of fresh air or the crossword or your cuppa. The person living with dementia may come to join you, great, but also be kind to yourself. Try all sorts of things, enjoy them if they work and it creates engagements, but be prepared to change, and that not everything will work every time is the other thing. But also just being outside alone is good for all of us in so many ways. And, you know, in these current difficult times, we perhaps all need to remember that, especially on the more dreary day like it is here today in Southampton. But, you know, even just stepping out for a breath of fresh air is good for us all.
Absolutely. So we're just kind of drawing to a close on the presentation we wanted to give. And just to say that if you can check out our website, I'll give that address shortly. please do look. There's a lot of other information among the other hundreds of insights we could share with you. The Care Culture Map and Handbook is available. We also have a poster tool as well that could go up on notice boards and other places, just to kind of trigger extra thoughts. Every care setting is unique and has its own kind of grounds and spaces and entrances and exits. And hopefully some of what we've been sharing with you this afternoon is fairly generic and universal, in the sense of it might stimulate a thought about how that could be achieved in your particular environment, whether domestic or care setting itself. And we continue to create publications and articles, particularly in the light of the current health crisis as well. Understanding your care culture, your set of behaviors and attitudes and values is quite key, because the health crisis has, if you like, really stimulated a new response in care settings around that. So we have, if you like, some ways of assisting that process going forward. And these are the ways that you can reach us. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, and there's a website. So thank you so much, Emma, and for everybody who's watching today. We really appreciate this opportunity.
That's been brilliant, Mark. Would you stop sharing just so we can come back to the big? Wow, that was absolutely brilliant. Oh, look, Abigail's there. That was really interesting. Thank you. One of the things I'd noted down, so I've just a few little points for me, and then just as people are starting to put their questions in, we've got a few already. How easy is it for people caring at home to use the Care Culture Map?
Yes, you can. It is probably aimed slightly more at care settings and at garden designers as well. But everybody has a culture, even as an individual. And the Care Culture Map comes with a handbook as well. In fact, hang on, I've just got a copy of it here. And within that are several.
That was handy, Debbie, that you had it behind you.
It was handy, wasn't it? So within it are several themes, one of which is called Weather Ready, which Mark has given a snapshot of. And so even if the map tool itself physically is not all so relevant in a home setting, the themes here are the most common themes that hinder engagement. And most things, when you read them, you can translate them very easily into your own home setting. You just substitute the organisation and the people to being you as the carer and any of your family or other people who enter the mix as well. Outside bodies have an influence too. And sometimes we do find that, occupational therapists coming into the home may have their own views around how a garden should be engaged with. That may or may not complement the person with dementia or the carer. So, many of the same issues apply. So, yeah, and there's also a poster that has top 10 or hints and tips, which is on the wall behind me. And that can come on its own, or it comes with the map as well, depending on which what you prefer. It's intended to be inspirational, and they're the statistical things. So if you have benches outside, you're more likely to stay outside 20% longer and things like that. 39% of people would go out in the rain in our study. It didn't matter what the weather was. So they're hints and tips to give you a flavour. So that's also available. And yeah, they are all translatable, though the study was done in a care setting, but it does also apply across all institutional settings. We've seen this used in schools too. So anywhere where there's people influencing how other people can engage.
Yeah, you see, like everything has a culture, our homes, our families, our neighborhoods, they all have cultures. So in a sense, the generic side of the tool is to say, you read the boxes on it, the idea is that you say, well, that's like us, or that's not like us. So there is a sense really of its usefulness in articulating stuff that's very subtle, because our routines, habits, and norms are things we take for granted. In a way, culture change is about reversing that process and making us aware of why we do that way. So the Care Culture Map is of value to reveal those hidden, subtle methods of engaging with each other and with the outside space. The other usefulness from a domestic setting is if there is intended to be a transition into care at some point, the Care Culture Map can aid you in the selection of the most appropriate place for your family member, because there's a way of working out if the care setting that's desired is person-centered in the sense that it uses its outside space and where it might be. So it's giving you a little bit more of an evaluation strategy around choosing the most suitable place.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Debbie. Right, we've got a few questions in here. So I'm going to go in order. So Joyce has asked, in your study, did you find people felt good about having a job? They felt valued?
So a job in the garden, is that?
I think yeah, a job in the garden. Yeah, I think, yeah.
People like to be helpful and useful. So yes, definitely. And what was interesting in the study was, in some cases, actually, the person living with dementia was the expert. So we have a beautiful anecdote of a care home with a grapevine, and it was clearly one of the residents' jobs. She knew how this was to be pruned, which needs quite careful horticultural knowledge. She could no longer get up on the step ladders, she was too frail, but she guided the gardener with sort of left a bit, right a bit, take that bit off. It was her job to prune it, just somebody else carried out the physical task that she could no longer quite manage. And but they had learnt that this was a skill she had, a knowledge she had. So yes, everybody likes to be helpful, but it's about finding relevant and appropriate tasks that make sense and meaning for that individual, not just a task for the sake of a task's sake, you know.
I think there's also, adding on to that, what we found also was this concept of meaningful occupation, and there's a myriad ways of matching what someone's character or wishes are in the outside space. And then there are ways of extending that experience. So for example, someone who likes to cut flowers, that could be someone then added to who likes to press flowers. There could be someone that likes to make cards. So sometimes the outside space becomes experimental in the sense of, let's find out more about what someone really loves to do. So it's a good space to trial those kinds of things out, or to check things that you think are going on indoors as well, in terms of someone's character. You know, we know those people who like to tidy and clean. Well, the outside space is an amazing place to kind of to do that. So yeah, it's not to be underrated in terms of discovering more about who you are caring for, really.
I really like how it sort of leveled the playing field in that in this scenario of the grapevine. You know, it's the person who was being cared for who was actually, well, they didn't level it because she was in charge. She was telling the gardener what to do and really using her skill set, which was brilliant.
But in a way, that's a really good example of what we refer to as relationship-centered care, where it blurs who's the carer versus who's being cared for. It's like a family. It's much more blurred. And so that was a very good example of that in play.
The other thing about that particular anecdote, I think, is that you had a gardener there who was a gardener-carer. So he was open to the idea of obtaining new information about that resident, who was fairly new at the time, in order to ensure that everyone knew this. So there was a home that was open and poised to know new things about who they were with. And I think you're right about the democracy in the outside space. Who's the carer, who's being cared for, can be swapped around. This person feels more confident than the carer because it's a scary place, but for her, she's been out there for years. So I'd say really explore that. You know, yeah.
Right, I'm conscious of time. We've got 6 minutes, so we might have to. I'll have to stop butting in with points just to make sure we get through these answers. So somebody's asked, were people with dementia involved in the studies?
Yes, this study was deliberately started from a dementia angle, and we began with 24 care homes across England and Wales. 17 stayed to the end of the project, and the majority of them were 95% plus residents with dementia. Though anecdotally, since we've identified all of the findings apply across any care setting. You know, it's just the level of communication or understanding that may come into play at different points for different people. But yeah, it was predominantly done with dementia residents in care settings across a wide range of types of homes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to keep it to one answer. Is that all right? Anna has asked, with current COVID safety regulations restricting visits to care homes, have you any suggestions of bringing the outside inside, especially for family members visiting via windows?
Yeah, I mean, the important thing here is that, especially as this is winter, you've got lots and lots of plants that can be brought inside. You could be doing tasks inside, window boxes, hyacinths, anything like that that brings color and fragrance through. You can still open doors. You can still maybe arrange around the exits or the views out to the garden space, maybe create smaller meeting areas as well. Rethink things like the areas around entrances and exits so that you can get the fragrances, you can get the activity that's still going on. Think about the blinds and the net curtains and everything like that that's hindering that.
A good one for sharing that could also happen through a window visit is, planning ahead. Actually, for gardeners particularly, you get quite excited about choosing your seeds at this time of year for what you're going to plan to plant for the season to come. And so sharing a catalogue through a window and choosing what you're going to grow, and it could be the family member goes to buy those in the hope that actually as the vaccines come online, that these things may be able to be enjoyed together at a later point, or delivered straight to the home for them to begin to grow and then share later down the line the produce of their conversations before.
I like the use of the catalogue. Okay, so Judy has asked, so Greater Manchester Older People's Network, it's Paul McGarry, he's doing a piece of work around the deconditioning challenge for people who've been shielding for a long period and have lost the habit of outside. So I feel like there's a bit of a split between people who have been, certainly in the first lockdown, they were using the outside, they were in the parks, they were in the gardens if they had them. And then we had this quite a big group of people who were shielding, who were not using that space, and now we seem to, so any thoughts on what Judy's asked there?
This actually sort of alludes to a part of the session I did earlier where I said about be careful about fears hindering and building up, not going out. What we saw in our study sometimes was that people had come into care homes and they had not been going out in their own home for some time, for a variety of reasons, often hinging around fears that had evolved in that home setting, either for themselves or from their carer at home. And so that same deconditioning was occurring in those scenarios. It is about families working with the care settings to help rebuild up strength and stamina over time. That can begin inside, but actually it's about small steps and building it gradually and following interests. It's a common scenario. It's not actually a new thing, I don't think. It's perhaps just affecting slightly more people than it might have done previously, but it's something that sadly occurs quite a lot already at certain stages of people's conditions, perhaps prior to going to care settings. So step outside, take it slowly and build it up gradually.
And also maybe, are there things that are familiar for that person that they would go out to see? Are there favorite plants? Are there objects, things that they may have brought from a home setting? And also think about rearranging the garden as well. If it's baby steps again, move the bench so that it becomes the milestone before another one,
Bring things closer.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to finish with a question from Joy. And Joy wouldn't mind me saying that she lives with dementia and she has the most amazing garden, and definitely spent, I would say, 90% of the first lockdown in the garden every day, whatever the weather. And she's asked, did you get invited to help design professional spaces like the RHS? Do you ever get a chance to have an input there?
We've designed for a number of care settings and hospitals. We were fortunate actually to do a series of workshops for the RHS, which was quite exciting. We even took a gnome into the RHS who were banned, but we snuck in our gnome. And great to hear Joy is using her garden, as we all did. It's been our sanity through these many months. We haven't done any sort of RHS actual settings, and partly that's we're as keen to help change culture and attitudes as well as design. So we are an unusual organisation in that we carry out both. And so in some cases, we also support our design colleagues with helping them make sure that they provide the right design solutions understanding culture, which may be new to them too. So we work with our own design peers too. So we're in an unusual camp in that we stand in both the design and care sector. But yes, we're always happy to help where we can, but we always start from the people piece first.
Thank you. And that's the perfect ending. It's 2:30. Thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. We're getting lovely messages through as well. If you look in the chat, there's some great messages coming through. So it just, yeah, so I said thank you. I've got a cat here, so there you go. It wasn't a puppy or a 7-year-old, but we've got a cat involved, so that's good. So while I was talking about Joy, Joy's actually hooked up our next seminar, which is brilliant. She used to be a volunteer for search and rescue down in Essex. So our next seminar is going to be with, over my notes, the search manager, a guy called Mark, who's a search manager down in Suffolk. And it's going to be on the 27th of January, and he's going to be sharing his role as a search manager and the sort of stuff they get up to and how they support finding people. So that looks amazing. So once again, thank you so much. Rachel's saying thank you. It was great. We've gone 1 minute over. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm a terrible timekeeper, but I'm blaming Gertie, who was on my notes. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your time, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.